Simon, you're very welcome. Where are you? How's your lockdown going?
I'm at home. I'm in Hertfordshire, and it's going well. It's been quite a productive period, really, because it's sort of I've had quite a bit of writing to do, so that's been a natty way of focusing me. If there is a silver lining to this awful situation, for me at least, that's been it.
Yeah, it's interesting because we had a variety of conversations with actors and directors over the last few weeks, and some of them have found it enormously frustrating because they're supposed to be creative. Because what else are you going to do? You know, that everyone's
Yeah.
expecting you to merge with scripts and ideas and locations booked and all this kind of stuff. And then there are other people thinking, well, no, actually, I have managed to, to move on. And but we were just ruminating just a few moments ago as to what kind of cinema industry we will be emerging to when they do open the cinemas and so on.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Well, I think if during this period VOD had emerged as the most lucrative means of exhibition, then I think theatrical cinema would be in trouble. But it hasn't. It hasn't proved to be financially more lucrative for the studios, and that's really the only thing that's ever gonna drive the business. Sadly. So I think, fortunately, I think cinema will be fine. It's going to be a while before we're all tucked up next to each other, eating each other's popcorn again, but that's to be expected. At least the kind of, you know, the tradition of shared experience hasn't been wiped out by this situation.
Yes. Wouldn't it be good if a vaccine came along very shortly and then we don't have to have these kind of conversations again? But anyway,
Oh God, yes.
um, tell us about. Meantime, we'll have to make do with your latest movie on a variety of VOD platforms.
He said derisively.
Yes, and we'll continue to do the same. Tell us about Lost Transmissions. Tell us about Theo. Tell us about this movie, Simon.
It's an independent film that I shot in Los Angeles in 2018. It's sort of indie films take a while to come out because they have to find distribution and they usually do the festival circuit. But it's a film by Catherine O'Brien, who I'm ashamed to say is the first female director I've worked with on a feature film, and I'm really happy that I did. It's based on a true story about a music producer that she was friends with who was a schizophrenic and who decided to come off his meds because he felt it was kind of living life through a filter. But as a result, he had a very severe schizophrenic break and kind of got lost in LA, as you can do very quickly. The homeless community there is massive, and you can go from being a totally functioning member of society to utterly kind of out of the loop very quickly, and that's what happens to Theo. But he meets up with a young chanteuse earlier on before he comes off his meds, played by Juno Temple, who has to sort of rescue him from the American healthcare system, which is extremely um, ill prepared to, deal with a lot of mental health issues. Because unlike here, where you can section people, you can submit them for care. In the States, you have to submit yourself, and a lot of delusional people will quite happily talk their way out of that. So it's a really lovely drama. It's not a comedy,
Yeah.
which was nice for me to do.
Yes, it's not a comedy. It's also not a romance, which I want to ask you about in just a moment. But just on the subject of the way you played Theo, I mean, I found you very scary to be around, even though it's not a violent movie. It's not that kind of schizophrenic delusion, because I think you
Yeah.
unpack some of that. But your performance is terrific, and I found you genuinely terrifying to be around.
Yeah, I think that was, their experience. And I think it was more because, and Catherine was careful to set this up, was that he's a really nice guy, and Theo is a really fun guy. You meet him at the beginning of the film, and he's a bit of a raconteur, and he's the life and soul of the party, and very fun and generous. And so when he becomes unpredictable, it is incredibly scary because it's such a shift in his personality, and he becomes incredibly unpredictable, and you're never quite sure if he's lucid or he's not, and that is terrifying. It's terrifying for people who are close to people with schizophrenia, or friends of yours, and it's also incredibly exhausting. You have friends that keep experiencing this, and it's very hard to continually be there, for some time. And that's not those friends being selfish. It's just a fact. It's a sad truth.
Given that it's not comedy and it's not really a romance, it is a story about a friendship. What is it about Juno Temple's character, Hannah? Why does she stick with Theo so doggedly?
I think because he sort of sees something in her initially. She's a songwriter, but she's having her own sort of issues in terms of dealing with depression and not being particularly confident. And he sees through all that and develops her as an artist. And they kind of get together and he invites her to his studio and they start to make music. And I think she feels not indebted to him in any way, but she feels the need to reciprocate that kind of support, and also she doesn't know him as well as his other friends, his friends who've been around him for a long time and are a little bit like, oh God, here we go again. She's more kind of, no, we need to help him. We need to be on his side. And she learns by doing that just how difficult that can be, to care for someone with a severe mental health issue who can't actually get, proper help.
Do you know? I mean, I presume you did because it would be the first thing that you asked Catherine O'Brien, given that she wrote it, she directed it, it's very much her picture. What was it that she wanted you? Why did she instantly think of you? Why did she want Simon Pegg for Lost Transmissions?
I did ask her that actually, because obviously the scripts that I get sent from other people tend to be along the lines of things I've done before, which is to be expected. So that turned up, and I read it and got on the phone with her, and we had a chat. And I think it was because she wanted the guy to be Theo to be sort of, and I'm not suggesting this is me, but to be sort of likable and approachable. And I think some of the characters I've played in the past have had that sort of ordinariness about them, normality about them.
Yeah.
And I think with The World's End as well, which was a comedy, but it was also about a guy suffering from, major depressive disorder and alcoholism and being on the verge of suicide, and all of that does come out in The World's End. You do see it. It's sort of, it really comes out at the end of the film, but all the way through that character, as maddening and annoying and ridiculous as he is, you can see there's a pain beneath all his bravado. And I think maybe she kind of cottoned onto that as well, which was I was so pleased about. It was a real pleasure for me to approach this film.
Can I ask you something about playing a producer? It's very hard to capture on film somebody producing music, and in fact, when I try and think of another example, I think of Telstar, the Joe Meek story, in which you have somebody conjuring sounds in a studio. There are
Right.
scenes. There's one central scene in this in which we see your character actually taking the work of a fairly poor band and turning it into something quite beautiful before then sort of pushing it a little bit too far. Do you look like you're at home in that studio?
Well, I did get lessons. Part of my preparation for the film, as well as doing all the research I did into schizophrenia, learning to look like I could play the piano, which was a really interesting experience. I got taught by Liz Kinnan, who taught Ryan Gosling for La La Land, and
Oh
she
yeah.
taught me all the physicality of. But I also was taught how to drive that mixing desk. It's a really old vintage desk actually, and so I got a whole course in what all those faders and dials and all that stuff meant, and I can't remember it now. But on that day, I was on point.
And you say that you learn how to pretend to play the piano. There's a beautiful scene earlier. I'm a huge fan of Juno Temple. There's a scene
Yeah,
early on in which your character, as you say, with all that kind of charm and life of the party thing, says, "No, come on, come and sing a song." And he's sitting by the piano, and she says, "Do you know?" And she cites a song by Daniel Johnston, obviously whose kind of figure lurks behind a lot of this. And there
mm,
is a scene in which she appears to sing the song, and you appear to play it. So are
yeah.
you not playing the piano, Jim? I actually thought you were. I kind of bought into that.
Well, I that is the greatest compliment ever. I kind of what happened was I started off trying to learn to play. My dad plays the piano, so I'm familiar with the keyboard. I started having lessons, but it became very apparent that it was going to take years to play the piano with that degree of kind of loose aplomb. And
Okay.
so what Liz taught me was where my hands should be, where my shoulders should be, and how my body should move. And that was a lot easier to kind of. So I was playing a mute piano
Right.
in roughly the right kind of zones. Um, and I'd learned I'd actually played all the tunes very slowly with my tongue sticking out of my mouth. So when we came to film it, I just sort of like, played it like I was just an old hand, but Juno was singing. So I was able to play the mute piano. So there was no sound. It was just Juno singing without accompaniment. And then of course in the dub, they add the sound of they add the piano, and it all looks very convincing.
Somewhat later than we should have done. Let's play you a clip from from the movie, which Simon is here to talk about. So here's a little clip from Lost Transmissions.
God, being here makes me feel unstable. So, if you agree to go back to your family in London, we can get you out of here.
No, I can't go back to London.
Why not, Theo? Why? What, because you don't like it? Tough. You only have to bear it for a little while. But you really like this better?
I can't go back to London because London is a place in my past. I can't go back to the past. If I travel, I'll make a ripple.
A ripple?
Yeah.
Explain that, please.
Juno Temple and Simon Pegg in Lost Transmission. So it's one thing, Simon, to make us believe that you could play the piano, but I guess the toughest thing here is probably to act out someone who has schizophrenia, which people will have a kind of, we've seen that in the movies, but it's not really like that. I think you're very keen, really, to portray it the way it should be portrayed.
Yeah, I didn't want to walk into this and just sort of play crazy, which I think is often done when it comes to sort of mental health. People approximate what they think mental health problems are, and there's a very broad kind of accepted reality of what crazy means. And what I really wanted to do was to understand schizophrenia as a condition. It's not a split personality. That's what people generally think it is. It's a kind of people with multiple personalities. That's not that at all. It's more a sort of overpowering flow of information which the brain perceives in such a way that it starts to create narratives that form these delusions, which is it's basically what we do all the time, is we make sense of what we see, but the schizophrenic mind sees and hears so much more. It's having to deal with so much more information that it's trying to make sense of everything, and so these strange kind of narratives kind of build up, and these beliefs, and that's what the delusions are. So I met with schizophrenics, and I got to know the guy who the film was based on. We became friends, and it was interesting talking to him because he's well now. He's on his meds and he's fine, but he talks about the delusions, talks about how he utterly believed the delusions he was having, these crazy ideas about time and sea mammals and all this sort of stuff, and he said it made complete sense to me. So it was really about. Yeah.
Can I ask you one question about this? I mean, I have a friend who has suffered from schizophrenia, and the medications work very, very well. One of the things I liked particularly about this film was it doesn't pretend that his talent is due to the fact that he is schizophrenic. It's that he works, he has his talent despite the fact that he is schizophrenic. There isn't any romanticization of it.
Yeah, absolutely, and that was important to Catherine. There's a moment like the bit that you mentioned when he's mixing that song, and it suddenly comes into focus, and it's amazing. But very quickly, it moves beyond that into a sort of cacophony of nonsense. And there is that very romantic idea that insanity, in inverted commas, leads to great art, but it's a hindrance, I think. Great art might come from it in a way if the artist manages to interpret how they're feeling, because it creates something that's very strange, but it isn't the source of great art. And I think it's silly to suggest that, you have to be, the subject of huge mental suffering in order to create anything of worth,
Simon, thank you very much, Steve, for spending some time with us. Lost Transmissions is the new movie. Mission Impossible, is that delayed for a while, as far as you know?
So
just before you go?
September we're due back on. So I'm guessing that the production was never shut down. They just kept prepping it in separate rooms. So we're due to start again soon. So it's back to the craziness, the real craziness.
All right. Simon, thanks for your time.
Thank you, guys. Nice to talk to you.